In this nugget, let's continue our work with AAA, but this time let's do a scalable AAA implementation. Let's have a TACACS Plus server or a Radius server out there on the network that contains all of the user account information for all of our engineers and end users, everybody in the organization, and let's leverage that with AAA. Now again, this is where we're going to want to be very careful, very precise in our lab exam. Careful because we're going to initiate that AAA new model command, and right when we do that, we could make follow-up configurations that lock us or the proctor out of the device. Quick, easy way to fail. And the other thing we're going to have to do is be very precise with the configuration, because this is one of those areas where you can't fully test everything to make sure you did it right. You see, there's going to be no TACACS Plus server. There's going to be no Radius server. These are going to be fictitious. So we're not going to be able to go to them, create an account, and then log in with that account on the device. We have to be guaranteed we've followed their instructions explicitly so that it gets graded correctly. And just a little side note, these are my least favorite types of tasks in the lab exam. When I can't fully verify something, it gets a tad bit annoying. Now, I won't do this every time in every one of these nuggets, but remember, it's a great idea to make sure you can find your documentation on the particular feature that you are practicing with, and then you can do it very quickly. We start at this navigation screen, the same one you would have in the exam environment. Remember, to get here, you roll your mouse over support and you choose all products. We go to the iOS, and then we go to the iOS category that pops up, and then we go to the 15 M&T, and we go to 15.2 M&T, and then finally 15.2.2 is fine, or 15.2.3T is fine. And once you get there, you're going to expand documentation. You're going to go to your configuration guides. And for us, for AAA, it would be under security services and VPN. Notice three major categories here: secure connectivity configuration guideline, data plane stuff, and user services stuff. Certainly, AAA would be under our user services stuff, and there it is, third from the top: authentication, authorization, and accounting configuration guide. So here would be your body of documentation for just about anything they could ask of you when it comes to AAA. So let's have some fun with this demonstration. Let's sit down at our exam and we get the following task. Configure all logins to R1 to use a group of Radius servers at 10, 10, 10, 100 through 102. Use the case-sensitive local database in the event the servers are unavailable. Use admin 101 and password Cisco. The Radius server expects traffic from the fast Ethernet 0/0 interface and uses a key of Cisco 123. You immediately begin to see so many areas where you could make a mistake here if you didn't read and enter information in carefully. This does not seem to be that difficult. I mean, really, it's more of a typing test as long as we know how AAA works on the device. And that's why we're not given that many points. I'd say the point values typically range from 2 to 4 or 5, and this is on the lower end of the scale. We only get 2 points when this is configured. So to make sure I get this 100% accurately, I jot down notes on my scratch paper. I indicate we're using Radius. That's a pretty important note. Servers 100, 101, and 102 in that last octet respectfully. I make a note of the username and password, the Radius key that's accepted or expected, the interface that we are supposed to use. So I jot down careful notes to make sure as I'm doing my data entry that I don't misinput any of these important parameters that the grading script is going to be looking at directly. So here we are on the R1 device, and I quickly check that we are configuring the correct device. That's always embarrassing. Enter the exact configuration that would have gotten you the points. but put it on the wrong device. That's a Homer Simpson dope moment. We don't want that happening. So here we are on R1, easy for me to say, and we're going to go into global configuration mode, and you and I know it's time for a new model. We want AAA new model on this particular device. So here we go, AAA new model. And then I think what I would do next, thinking in terms of order of operations, is absolutely, before I forget, before we could potentially lock ourselves out, I'm going after what would be required for our backdoor into the device, our fallback methodology. And that is a local user accounts database, case sensitive, admin 101 with a password of Cisco. There's another command I'm going to use right away that would be so easy to forget. And it mentioned the radius servers are expecting to see traffic from a particular interface on this device, fast Ethernet 0/0, and that is our IP and not source route, our IP radius source interface command. So let's make sure that we put that in. That would be a really easy one to forget in this configuration, so I tackle it right away. Now, it's a bit of a typing test. I have to define my radius servers and put them into a group. This is easy, but we just got to make sure we're not making a mistake when it comes to the data entry. So it's radius server, and I believe it's the host keyword. Remember, you could always utilize your context sensitive help if you don't do these kind of configs every day. And then it's 10, 10, 10, 100 is our first one. Anything else we can input here? Yeah, you better believe it. It's that key. So we'll input the key in an unencrypted form, and the key was Cisco 123, and that is with an uppercase C. Now, of course, we can just use the up arrow because we've got 101, and then finally we've got 102. Great. So we've got those radius servers defined. We have the appropriate keys associated with them. Now we're ready to put them into a group. It didn't say anything about a particular group name, did it? No, it didn't. So we can, that's totally up to us. So I'll say AAA, group, server, radius, and the group is, how about my group? Now we'll indicate the various servers that are part of that group. We've got 100, then up arrow on the keyboard. We've got 101. We've got 102. Notice inside the group there are various parameters we could set, like dead time or load balancing options. We would watch for that in the particular task requirements, but in our case, we had nothing like that. So let me kind of sanity check things against my particular task here. I think I'm getting pretty close. And again, I would be doing this via my written check sheet. The server expects traffic from fast Ethernet 0/0. We took care of that. The key of uppercase C, then ISCO123. We took care of that when we defined these three servers. We put them into a group. There was no specific name we had to give that group. We configured fallback of admin 101 password Cisco, and that jogs my memory on the final thing we need to do, and that is specify for all logins that nice default methodology that we are going to use. And obviously, we're going to fall back to the case-sensitive local database. So we got one more big command to make together here. In global configuration mode on R1, we're going to say AAA authentication. Use your context sensitive help. No shame in that. This is for logins. It is going to be our default methodology. And we want to bring in a group we created, and we called it my group. That was one of the parameters that we got to specify that was not dictated to us. So it's the my group, and we could do local case as the fallback methodology. Remember how it works. If the radius servers are not available, you fall back to local case. If the radius servers are available and they say no to a login attempt, they reject some user trying to get into this device, then we don't go to the fallback of local case. From a verification standpoint, since we don't have these radius servers in our lab exam somewhere, this might be a really good time to do a little show run and get in here and just kind of, all right, we got our true model, AAA new model set up. We've got the radius my group set up. We can see the servers. It dropped in the default ports for us. We can see our authentication list. We better see a username and password entry in here. There it is. It better be accurate. So you can come through and you can verify the configuration elements that you entered. All right, great. Now what we'll do is we will go ahead and kind of a drum roll moment here. Why don't we go over to a neighboring device? We'll go over to R2 and we'll try and telnet in. The default login authentication method should kick in and it should be utilizing the username and password, because the radius servers are not going to be able to be communicated with because they don't physically exist out there in the network. So what happens when we log out of this R1 device and try and log back in the console port? Well, sure enough, because of our configuration, we're going to be presented with a username and password prompt. We can put in our fallback of admin 101 and the password, and then notice the radius servers are going to be attempted to be communicated with. They don't exist, so they're going to time out, and then we're going to be permitted into the particular device utilizing the local username and password credentials that we entered. So we can tell our configuration is successful. All we would really have to do from a verification standpoint is, again, go in and look at all the mandatory parameters that they gave us. And you can see that I've circled many of them here, and make sure that those parameters are entered in perfectly. So in this nugget, we examined how to use AAA, but with external authentication sources like radius servers. The configuration would be identical if it was TACACS servers that we were doing out there. We would take a TACACS server group and create it, for example. Maybe it's just a single radius server that you are to communicate with. We will read very carefully and then configure the device, making sure not to miss a single requirement detail that they may have provided us in the task requirements. So we sure did a lot in this action-packed nugget. We made sure we could find the documentation on this particular feature, just in case there was some nitpicky detail that we could not recall that we wanted to look up. We ensured that we could take a task and very carefully implement every aspect of that task in order to get rewarded a whopping 2 points in this case. And of course, we also looked at the operation of AAA once again, this time moving beyond the local database. I sure hope you found this nugget informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.